Good evening, everyone. So welcome, fellow Nuffield Scholars, investors and guests. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the first of 4 webinars, the Nuffield Australia 2019 Scholar presentations. Normally the 2019 Scholars would have presented at the National Conference in September 2020, but unfortunately that event was cancelled. So our scholars have been champing at the bit to tell us all what they learnt on their scholarship. We are hoping to run a national conference this year in October, and the 2019s will have another opportunity to deliver their insights and update us on what they've been doing on farm and in their businesses. You'd appreciate it's very difficult to condense almost 2 years of travels and interviews and a 10,000 word report into just 10 minutes. So the 2019 scholars are lucky that they'll have a couple of opportunities to present. This one virtually and then again face to face. Being able to present information is a skill that our scholars are polishing every time they present their findings. A very special welcome tonight to the 2020 and 2021 Nuffield Scholars that are joining us. The alumni, the board, your investors, all support you as you develop your topic and develop your skills to navigate a COVID-affected life and business. So the presentations tonight will tell you things about agriculture that maybe you didn't think you needed to know. But my mantra is, to be interesting, you need to be interested. Interested in industries outside your own, interested in countries outside your own, interested in value adding if you're a commodity farmer, interested in the entire food and fibre system that we are all a part of. That's how you become a well-rounded person who can weigh up opportunities, threats and challenges, drawing on a vast reservoir of information. As a Nuffield Scholar, you have a vast reservoir of people that you can draw upon. Other scholars, your investors, and people in our network whom you can call on for advice and information. Tonight we will hear from 4 2019 scholars on topics from eggs and potatoes to data and people. Over the 4 webinars, over 4 weeks, we'll run the gamut from carrots, cotton, cherries, cattle, from soil, climate change, to ag tech and animal welfare. There'll be something for everyone to learn, even if you didn't know that you needed to learn it. So we'll listen to each presentation, one after the other, and we have a Q&A window in which you can be typing questions as they occur to you. The presenters can be answering those questions in the Q&A window, plus we will be having a Q&A session at the end. So we will try and get to as many questions as we can in the hour that we are hoping to run for. So now, please sit back and enjoy the first of our scholar presentations, Kerri-Ann Lamb, 2019 Queensland Scholar.
Good evening, everyone. My presentation is on the future growth of potatoes. First of all, I'd like to thank Nuffield Australia for the exceptional experience of being afforded a Nuffield Scholarship. Thanks to Horde Innovation for sponsoring me to broaden my horizon and bring back learning to the wider industry. Thanks to my GFP group and all the people I visited who welcomed me into their business and their homes in the pursuit of my studies. To all my work colleagues, thanks for keeping the wheels turning. And most of all, thanks to my loving family and especially my husband. His support has been unwavering. In the next slide, I'm going to show you a very quick video of what we do on our potato farm.
I'm Kerri-Ann Lamb and I am a fourth generation potato farmer. These potatoes are planted in October, so they'll be ready to harvest in February. So it's about a 15-week growing cycle, and then they will be harvested, sent to the pack house, and they'll be sold fresh in supermarkets as brush potatoes. I think as potato growers, we want consumers to know that potatoes are actually very healthy for you. They are a complex carbohydrate. They have lots of vitamins and minerals. They are extremely versatile and they're extremely affordable. Potatoes really tick all the boxes. Potatoes eaten in the right way. You can eat potatoes every single day and they're very good for you. In Australia, we have all of our table potatoes and all of our fresh potatoes are grown here in Australia and they stay in Australia, so we don't have any imported whole potatoes. You can be sure when you go to the supermarket and you're buying fresh potatoes, you're buying potatoes that are grown in Australia for the Australian market, all 100% homegrown. As a Hall Innovation Nuffield Scholar, in 2019, I travelled to many countries to look at trends and opportunities for the future of potatoes. I saw a lot of innovation, visited a lot of growers, looked at a lot of offerings at supermarkets and looked at what we can do within our industry in Australia to improve it and to keep up with all the trends and opportunities that are new and emerging. Science shows that cooked and cooled potatoes develop a resistant starch that is absolutely excellent for gut health. So that's a technology that our business is going to bring back to Australia.
So where have we been, where are we now, and what will the future hold? Over decades, the industry has noticed a slow and steady decline in fresh potato consumption. Australia produces 1.4 million tonnes of potatoes each year, and around 65% are grown mostly for multinational companies for products such as crisps and frozen fries. Therefore, growers like us only comprise of about 35% of the fresh market, which includes all retail, food service, and a small amount of export. This is similar to the rest of the world, where less than 50% of potatoes grown are consumed fresh. While visiting China, although they are the biggest producer of potatoes in the world, they eat potatoes very differently to us in the Western world. Only recently, they are enjoying potatoes in Westernised cuisine. The Chinese have also embraced the profitability and sustainability per acre compared to other staple crops. Does the fresh potato industry really understand consumer drivers? During my travel, I found several key consumer drivers. Consumers want value for money, easy and time-efficient preparation, smaller portions, convenience, variety, less waste. They want to make environmentally friendly packaging choices. They want sustainability and they want to trust the source of their choices, making sure it demonstrates a transparent and social responsibility. If the industry acknowledges this, how can these messages translate to industry actions? A question was recently prompted by the International Potato Centre. How do you promote something we all take for granted? Several countries in Europe are leading the way, connecting to consumers. Although eating habits are changing and becoming more varied and complex, there's time pressure and potatoes take time to prepare. There's changing family habits, including a decline in weekday family dinners. Snacking and convenience foods are rising, eating out, taking away, home delivery, as well as prepared at-home meal boxes. We are also purchasing smaller portion sizes and single households are increasing. These are all real drivers the industry can lever off if we really listen to the end user. Demand for convenience and variety drive innovation. Product innovation in these areas of health, convenience will also keep potatoes exciting and relevant. There's tons of room for innovation and fresh strategies, including motivational, health and digital strategies. In my travels, I saw a wide variety of innovative products with clever elements, some of which are not commonly seen in Australia, such as heritage varieties, miniature potatoes, low carb, pre-cut, pre-peeled, ready to microwave in the bag, small boxes and innovative packaging, as well as pre-cooked and pre-mashed. Many small innovative businesses skip the middleman and sell directly to consumers. And this is a way of gaining immediate customer feedback to effectively develop new products. One such clever business I visited in the UK was the Potato Shop in Kent. Nikki Crawley grows and sells heritage potatoes through an online platform. Most products are sold online and they are simply posted to the customer. Negative health perceptions are a major concern because of the whole carbs are bad for us debate. This is a global issue for fresh potatoes. Every grower I visited mentioned health misconceptions as a concern. Solid science tells us differently though. So where is the negative messaging coming from? Well, it's certainly not from the fresh potato industry. If the industry doesn't tell their own story, the correct story, then others will with their own agenda. We can't continually allow potatoes to be lumped with pasta, rice and other white sugary refined grains. So telling the correct story is absolutely critical. Do potato marketing campaigns actually work? Well, Bud the Spud thinks so. He's reminding us that potatoes are fat-free and fab. He's also a little sexy and suggestive. While promotional activity is still a priority, industry bodies who use clever marketing strategies to raise the profile of their products can see some very good outcomes over time. While in the UK, I came across this marketing campaign above to re-engage younger consumers. It was successful in generating 5 million web visitors, 3 million YouTube views, and 1 million followers across social media. Data showed it had a 3% lift in fresh potato sales from 2015 to 2018. There is no marketing levy for fresh potatoes here in Australia. All levy funds are spent on research and development. Maybe the question needs to be asked, why are we spending huge amounts of money on R&D to grow perfect potatoes if sales are declining and consumers are moving away from them? As growers, we should be asking the question, do potatoes actually sell themselves? And do we need to remind consumers about all the fabulous benefits so they can reconnect with the humble potato? So everything we thought we knew just changed. We can't ignore the panic that developed this time last year. Fresh potatoes practically walked off the shelves. When faced with home isolation, people immediately went back to basics. They looked for Australian grown, they looked for locally grown, they looked for produce with a long shelf life, and they looked for value for money and comfort food. The pre-cut value-add veggies, well, they were left on the shelves. If you were a produce business that didn't sell to a supermarket or food manufacturer who had an established home delivery model, you may have found yourself jobless. We learnt a lot about how important provenance is to consumers. And for the first time, we were able to truly connect as growers to our community and our region. Key findings and the new normal. A new revitalised thinking about potatoes at all levels within the industry is required. Smarter shopping. Consumers are willing to do good and demonstrate a social responsibility. So providing stories about potatoes, where they come from and where they're grown, add an element of discovery. Health claims. They actually matter. Therefore, consistent messaging around health claims to consumers is 100% necessary. The industry needs to take charge and tell their own fresh potato story and debunk any negative messaging. Convenience and variety of products. Producers need better access to customer and consumer information to explore emerging trends and to improve their product offering in order to identify and test new innovation and convenience opportunities. The future of potatoes looks bright if we can find our way back into the hearts and minds of the millennials and furthermore, Gen Z.
Thank you very much, Kerri.
You're welcome.
I'd now like to hand it over to Tom Moore, 2019 Scholar from New South Wales. Thank you, Tom.
Hi, everybody. Before I get started, I just wanted to point out that you'll lose my video feed because of the technology I'm using. So, my name's Tom Moore. I'm a 2019 Nuffield Scholar, and I was sponsored by the Royal Agricultural Society Foundation. My study topic is to look into the future of housing systems for free-range egg production. First up, I'd like to acknowledge my sponsor, the Royal Agricultural Society Foundation, and Cecilia Logan. She's been brilliant as my contact to the foundation, and I'll be forever grateful. The opportunity afforded to me by this sponsorship is unmeasurable, so thank you. Secondly, everybody I travelled with. They turned out to be an amazing group of people. We bonded so well. We genuinely had an incredible time with so many laughs and even some tears, and I've missed you all greatly. And now that we're home and post-COVID, the privilege of travelling through China and the world is not lost on me. And I don't think we'll be holidaying outside of Australia anytime soon. I've also included the picture of the Washington Capitol building because, politically, over the last 2 years, a lot of things have changed from when I took this image. The ability to do the travel that we got to do as Nuffield Scholars in that year will have changed dramatically for the foreseeable future. And for that, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the Nuffield system that makes it all possible. And finally, I'd like to thank my wife, Jo. She's proven to not only be the inspiration for my Nuffield application, but also the glue that kept everything together back home. She was even able to have our firstborn just 4 days before I went on my 6-week-long GFT. Excuse the door slammer. I went on to my Nuffield travels with some preconceived expectations of what I might find. I'm a free-range egg producer myself, so I've seen my fair share of houses, shed conditions, and the things you should and shouldn't do. I was going into my travels with a view to improve the welfare outcome of free-range systems, and that had to tie in with improving the perception for the consumer. In Australia, there is very little emphasis being given to how the hen is housed when we talk about free-range eggs. Free-range eggs in Australia are simply denoted by the stocking density outside, and there is little more detail than that. And the housing system can have a massive effect on the well-being of the bird, and also whether the consumer would find it an acceptable way to house hens. The housing systems that you're seeing in this picture on the left is really a very standard housing layout. The particular system is a barn, so the birds don't get to go outside. But looking across them, the density appears imposing, and it may not actually be stocked any greater than the standard model code of practice for poultry. But does it make it okay? Legally, we're allowed to house over 30 kilos of chicken per square metre. It's a lot. Most sustainable egg farms would never run anywhere near that, and we tend to run around 18, which is basically 9 birds per square metre. But if it's looked upon by the consumer, it doesn't necessarily make it acceptable. What I was hoping to find was the picture on the right. It's a free-range aviary system, and the birds come and go as they please. And this particular house is mobile, so you can move it around the farm as the pasture sees fit. The house is capable of holding only 2,000 birds. So it is small scale and doesn't really fall into the large scale production bracket. What I ended up finding though, in the UK in particular, is that there's a growing trend of the consumers having a strong connection to the free range egg production style, with strong growth towards that market segment. Many houses and farms that are being built over there now are what I would say is cutting edge. This slide of pictures is all taken from an excellent example of what is possible on the Tyson's farm just south of York in the UK. The top left picture was a day and a half of production out of a single shed. We're not talking a small operator. There are 54,000 eggs there. The top right picture gives you an idea of how they've designed the free range area. I haven't seen an example of this in Australia, but it's a great idea. Dense tree and shrub plantings give great cover for the birds and encourage range area use. An interesting point to be made about this image is that this flock has been using that range area every day for over 6 months. And a normal pasture-based system with this many birds would usually include a significant area of bare soil, which has the obvious negative environmental impacts and really doesn't appeal to the consumer. The type of housing system in this shed is what's called a multi-tier Agri. The bird equipment goes all the way to the roof, and the nests are generally at the highest point in the structure, which helps fulfill the natural behaviours of the bird in wanting to roost up high. And it also helps them express their natural dominance hierarchy. These systems are entirely designed for the birds, and the ease of access for the stock person comes in second place. The bottom left picture is actually underneath all of the equipment, so the birds can use all of the area of the house and all of the area of equipment, so you don't necessarily need to reduce stocking densities. And referring back to the bad picture on the previous slide, these birds are actually housed at a higher stocking density in that barn. Now, I've included two of the most widely publicised concept houses here for discussion, but obviously we don't have a great deal of time. But on the left, we have the Kipster Egg Farm in the Netherlands. It is marketed as the most sustainable egg production building in the world. Off-grid, very limited emissions, and no ground contamination. And these are all positives, but from an Australian perspective, it certainly isn't free range anymore, even though it's marketed as such. And likewise, on the right is the Rondelle Egg Farm, also in the Netherlands. It's designed with a spoke and hub format with egg collection happening in the middle. And when I toured this farm, I came away disappointed and not surprised they're still using the concept drawings for their marketing material. The area between the spokes of the design is the range area for the birds. But due to the relatively short shed length, this doesn't give a great deal of space. And you'll even see in these pictures, they've laid astroturf to get some media shots. On a positive though, the public viewing areas and visitor information at both of these farms were fantastic. I also found this across Europe. Many new housing systems were being built and designed with public viewing areas. And this is something that's rarely considered in Australia. We're warned away from doing farm tours here, mostly from a biosecurity perspective, but I personally think it's going to be an important connection with the customer for those of us who are involved in intensive livestock farming. And it also offers a great market opportunity to sell eggs or produce from the farm direct to the consumer. So I came away from my travels wondering if visitor impressions can be improved without needing to lower stocking densities. This is really important as the viability of the farm is based around more or less how many birds you can carry and what the area or size of the building you need to put them in. So to utilise the space as best you can with multi-level equipment is going to be important for the future egg production. Now this outcome presents two major barriers for entry from what I found in Europe. The Australian egg market is made up by a few, and I mean less than 10 huge producers that produce over 90% of the eggs. And the rest of the market is all made up by smaller producers like myself. And the scale of the investment for the type of equipment that I found in Europe would mean, for example, I would have to double or triple the size of my business just to make one shed viable. The next major issue, which is a major issue, is that you need to put aviary-reared birds in an aviary housing system. Floor-reared pullets, like how most meat chickens are reared, will not function effectively on multi-tiered systems. The hens don't know to climb, and by the time she's learning to climb and fly and live in the system, they're already laying eggs on the floor, a problem that no production manager wants to work with. The larger operations in Australia are already rearing their own birds for their own purposes, and as time goes on, I'm confident they will be transitioning to aviary rearing systems. This significant investment isn't being made by the producers of commercially available pullets, such as the ones I buy, simply because the demand isn't there and there's little willingness to pay for more for the birds. So where does that leave us? Is it a chicken before the egg situation? And maybe. The outcome of my Nuffield travels is pointing me and our business to take the giant leap and rear the birds that we need for a system that we don't yet have. And it sounds crazy, and probably is, but with some extra capacity and a confidence of build it and they will come, we're hoping to have the first commercially available aviary-reared birds in the country, something that I hope will kickstart an improvement in the housing conditions for millions of birds throughout Australia. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you very much, Tom. Unfortunately, we couldn't see you while you're presenting, but we couldn't quite solve that problem, could we? I'd now like to hand over to Clare Peltzer, Nuffield Australia Scholar from Tasmania. Thank you, Clare.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jodie. Good evening, everyone. In Australia, there's a dire need to future-proof the agricultural industry by ensuring a continuous stream of youth are being strategically attracted into a career in ag. And we're not just leaving it up to chance. I'm Clare Peltzer, a 2019 Nuffield Scholar from Australia. Why aren't you working? A massive thank you to Nuffield Australia and the International Network for sharing your wealth of knowledge with me as I travelled through 14 countries and met hundreds of inspiring people. My friends and family who continuously supported me, Meat and Livestock Australia as my sponsors, and this group of 8 other scholars from all around the globe who taught me to consider all perspectives before forming an opinion. Here we are overlooking the Rift Valley in Kenya. I felt adequately prepared and qualified to research this topic, as I'm the livestock manager of our family-run farm producing prime lambs and a secondary science and agriculture teacher. With a foot in both industries, I have a good grasp on the strengths and limitations of both. Initially, I was looking for independent programs to be implemented into either schools or the industry as a quick fix. Instead, I found that these pockets of successful programs were so intertwined into the culture, it was difficult to pinpoint the exact replicable program, so I started looking more holistically. Research shows that between 12 to 16 years old is when youth are choosing their career options. So this is the pivotal time period where I focus my energy and research. In order to gain a larger picture about the attractants and deterrents of our industry, I asked people across multiple countries, from government through to individuals, in agriculture, in education, and the general community. To begin exploring this international issue, I needed to know the barriers these potential youth were facing. The perception that agriculture equals farming is the most influential limiting factor. As perception equals reality, we need to address this. Based on research collected in 2017 from 12 to 16-year-olds in Western Australia, there are some reasons why individuals did not pursue a career in ag. They said not being from a farming background, cannot afford a farm, do not want to move to the country or regional area, do not know what jobs are involved in agriculture in the agricultural industry, can earn more money from a different industry, lacks technology and innovation. This is where those in the industry know the truth, but the message to youth needs some clarity. Therefore, we need to broaden their view of agriculture. If you think of all the jobs involved in agriculture, they should come under the one of the following headings. The acronym Perfect Opportunities, coined by Dr. Lamy of South Africa, where P stands for those working in policies, E, education and training, R, research, F, finance and farming, E, entrepreneurship, extension and advisory services, C, communication, and T, technology and trade. So who is responsible? It then became a numbers game, whereby when a larger proportion of the population say that they work in ag, this will lead to a higher probability that a young individual will interact with someone in ag on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. So, who is responsible for building capacity? Is it industry alone, agricultural classes in schools, the government, or individual farmers? It's everyone's role. But we need to be strategic to ensure we're interacting with the youth at the right time with high quality and positive experiences in agriculture. So now the hard part. How do we get all of the stakeholders to be operating on the same framework to ensure we are strategically interacting with these youth? And like every good idea, it's a stolen one. So I found a piece of work from 2015 about why youth aren't pursuing a career in science in the UK. Professor Louise Archer and her team surveyed 40,000 10 to 19-year-old students and coined the concept of science capital, which can be imagined like a hold-all or a bag, containing the science-related knowledge, attitudes, experiences and resources that an individual acquires through life. I transcribed this into agriculture, as they're similar in this sense, and coined it the ag bag. Essentially, if an individual knows a fair bit about agriculture, sees themselves in the industry, has connections with people in any aspect of perfect, then they will have a full ag bag and have a high probability to pursue a career in agriculture. With that knowledge, we need to provide these 12 to 16-year-olds with opportunities in school and the community to fill their ag bag with positive experiences and interactions in agriculture. Remembering that we need to fill the ag bags of non-farming background youth too. Now to the application of this framework. Currently, we have some good programs and events in place all around Australia. So rather than reinventing the wheel, we just need to enhance what already exists to ensure that we can fill as many ag bags as possible. I will use Tasmania as an example. Every May, we have over 63,000 people walk through the gates of AgFest to visit the 700 stalls on offer. Although there is a strong agriculture focus, we are not currently capitalising on the abundance of human and physical resources in the state at the one time. Therefore, we can enhance AgFest by adding specific pre or post events aimed at youth. Currently, it's common practice for youth to take a gap year, a year off from study, between secondary and tertiary schooling. However, in Ireland, they have a similar year, but a transition year between year 10 and 11, or the ages of 16 and 17 years old, for an optional non-academic year to explore potential career path options and sports. For us, it would be a well-structured year where youth could explore the perfect jobs before choosing their final school subjects and tertiary studies route. Furthermore, it could be a suitable model for non-agricultural people having career breaks or sabbaticals. Our young audience is captivated by the computer stuck to their hands. So let's utilise social media, as it's a free to use and a free to upload platform for us to connect with youth. Research conducted in the UK found that 86% of teenagers will search online or their socials for information about career options. We need to make sure content produced by the industry is the top search item. Sandy Brock of Sheepishly Me in Ontario, Canada, shares the warts and all story of indoor sheep farming with hundreds of thousands of her subscribers. The agricultural education system in Tasmania ranges from high quality, well-implemented programs to weakly funded and fragile programs. This is representative of many states in Australia. We need to support agriculture in the schools. Ag teachers are expected to have knowledge of all sectors, so we could use the United States model of implementing curriculum for agricultural science education, or CASE courses, which are industry generated, fully resourced programs aligned to the curriculum, and they can be picked up by any teacher. Agricultural excursions carry great value when filling the ag bag, but are expensive in time, resources, and paperwork for both the teacher and the agriculturalist. In the UK, Ireland, and now starting off in Australia, a farm farmer time experiences where a perfect individual connects with a classroom of youth on a fortnightly basis, in real time, where their ongoing relationship allows for their ag bag to remain topped up and the formation of a strong connection to a professional in agriculture. Agritourism is found on nearly every tourist route, but to make sure the experience is not just the elevator pitch for youth to fill their ag bags, I launched the Educational Agri-Tours of Tasmania only a month pre-COVID-19, so not the best timing. But the plan is that I will tailor authentic experiences for school groups to meet and explore the career options of Perfect by meeting role models and potential employers for their future. Finally, my take-home messages. We need to broaden the perception of agriculture by using Perfect, as it's everyone's role to attract and retain youth. And we're best to enhance the programs that already exist, but be strategic in our methods to ensure those 12 to 16-year-olds have a full ag bag and choose a career in agriculture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claire. That's wonderful. We have one more scholar to hear from tonight, and that is Andrew Sargent from South Australia, Nuffield Australia 2019 scholar. Andrew, I'll hand over to you.
No worries. Thanks for that, Jodie. Good evening, everyone. Today I'll be talking about the use of open source software and principles in agricultural technology. First up, my scholarship would not have been possible without the generous support provided by the GRDC and Nuffield Australia. I would also like to thank the GRDC for their generous support of the Nuffield program over many years. I would also like to thank my parents, Malcolm and Jane, and partner Lauren for their support over the last 2.5 years, giving me the opportunity to travel and undertake the scholarship. We run a family-owned cropping business in the mid-north of South Australia, growing wheat, barley, canola, lentils and oat and hay. We've always had an interest in adopting new technology, especially precision ag technologies, to make our operation more efficient and profitable. These were typically provided by the manufacturer of the equipment, and we would regularly run into issues with compatibility between different hardware and software, even within the same brand. These hurdles had hampered our efforts to adopt some of the technologies we would have liked, which prompted the question, was there a better way to collect, store and use our data? We recently had a company approach us about moving to their farm management platform, and it looks to be a really good platform, but I'm apprehensive to make the switch. When we signed up with our current provider, they look to be the best fit for us, but needs change, systems develop, and we're looking to change. While this new provider says they'll enter all our existing data into the new system, which is great, that's currently a manual process with the potential for errors. And what happens when something better is developed down the track? Is the new provider going to manually transfer that data back across again, or will we have developed a standardised storage format or protocol for transferring between data types? So I set out to find other ways to collect, manage and store our data. The first place I started looking was in the world of open source software. So software is essentially given away for free. So I think Linux, OpenOffice, Mozilla Firefox, Thunderbird. The software is developed by a community and made available for people to download, use and modify. And depending on the license, can be incorporated into other software and sold as a commercial product. Many of these open source software offerings are as good or better in many aspects than their commercial counterparts. For an issue that was effectively created by closed standards and proprietary systems, an open and collaborative approach could have been the solution to the issues we were facing. There are many open source projects in agriculture that have been initiated in the last few years, and they're gaining momentum. However, as a core part of open source is giving away the software, it makes funding these projects difficult, and these projects in ag are still catching up to their counterparts in consumer computing. So what is open source and what is open data? The two are very different. Open source is a source code for a program. It's what makes it work. It's like the operating system on your computer or the email system you use to write emails. It's what does the work or is the brains of it. Open data refers to data sets that are freely available to use in a format that is easily readable and modifiable, and usually refers to government data and public data sets. I'm in no way suggesting that farmers should be providing open data or making their data freely available to the public. There's a whole raft of regulation that has been developed in recent years to prevent just that and to ensure the privacy of data, like the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, in Europe, and the Australian Farm Data Code. But growers should be able to make their data available to who they choose in a format they choose. Originally, I thought that a move to a completely open source ecosystem was the solution. Remove any reliance on commercial products and lock into proprietary systems like had been achieved in the personal computing space by Linux with their operating system and associated software. There are open source options for nearly any program you want to run on a PC. But it soon became apparent that it was unlikely to be a realistic goal for our industry. In IT, the guys that had the problem also had the skills to develop a solution. Whereas in agriculture, the vast majority of farmers don't have the skills to develop software, which reduces the pool of potential developers. That said, there are several open source projects in many aspects of ag tech, some in universities, others have evolved by themselves by passionate farmers or programmers with a passion for agriculture. And I'd just like to list a few examples. So FarmOS is the only example I could find of an open source farm management platform. I met with Mike Stenter in Maine, where it was originally designed for smaller vegetable growers in the area. Along with Mike, he also has an active community of contributors, but it, however, lacks some of the features of commercial systems and is somewhat clunky to use for broadacre cropping at the moment. But with some tweaks, it could be useful for grain production systems and provide a starting point for a shareable database. AgOpenGPS is one that I really like. It's a very farmer-orientated project. It was started by one farmer, Brian Tischler in Alberta, Canada, to fix a problem where he couldn't see where he'd sown with the disc seeder into strip stubble. Just a simple coverage map was all it was. It's now grown into a full-blown auto steer package with all the bells and whistles and has an active and growing community of farmers and developers supporting it. Meanwhile, trying to maintain the goal of being easy and accessible for anyone. There are farmers that have installed this system with no technical background, sourced all the components, built the PCB, set up the software, installed it into a vehicle and run it. And they say it rivals the more expensive systems. It's been a great example of a project that has been adopted by farmers and is thriving. OADA and ISOBlue are two initiatives of the Purdue University's Oates Centre, the Open Ag Technology and Systems Centre in West Lafayette, Indiana. OADA, or Open Ag Data Alliance, is an open source API specification to facilitate automation and interoperability between ag data systems, meaning it provides a means to share data between different systems. Whereas ISOBlue is an open source hardware project that allows the connection of agricultural machines and the data they generate directly to the cloud to allow real-time access to the machine data. The Oates Centre, along with Wolf's Neck Research Centre in Maine, who are leading the development of Open Team, are at the forefront of promoting adoption of open source principles into ag data. However, like many research programs, the great ideas they are developing seem to be taking their time to be disseminated down to and adopted by farmers. Other initiatives for improving data interoperability have started since my travels. In Europe, the GAIA-X program has started with the goal of creating common requirements for European data infrastructure. It's a juggernaut that encompasses many different industries and countries, which will be great for a unified system, but may delay the implementation, waiting for a consensus from so many groups. So this one will be an interesting one to follow. Meanwhile, closer to home, here in South Australia, the Collaboraculture program was launched late last year, with their first goal being to develop an open source vineyard model to define vineyard assets, allowing them to provide the critical first stage to build other technologies on top of. My recommendation to industry would be that we establish an independent system or platform for growers to store and share their data as they need, and encourage the adoption of a common open data format, or request that manufacturers make their protocols available to allow the simple transfer of data between systems. Putting growers back in charge of their data will build confidence in ag tech and reduce some of the barriers to adoption by making it simpler for growers to try tech without the fear of locking or losing their data. Ideally, the way I see it, there would be an independent storage platform where growers can have their data stored in an open, transparent format and then share it with third-party commercial providers as they choose. We need to be conscious, however, that we don't create another standard to add to the confusion. Whichever way we go, be it opening up current data protocols or developing a standard, there needs to be buy-in from developers and industry to ensure that it's flexible and meets grower and tech developer needs. Since I started this journey 2 years ago, one thing I've noticed is that the projects that are farmer-led, like AgOpenGPS and FarmOS, seem to have gained more momentum than the university-based projects. I think that highlights the importance of grower buy-in and making the projects easily accessible. Many of the parts needed to create an open source ag data ecosystem already exist, from the operation of the machine to the collection of that data and transmission to a storage location, to the paddock management recording. These products are not revolutionary. They get the nuts and bolts of it done. The things that if you're an ag tech provider are not your points of difference, and it's not why people buy your product. Well, at least they shouldn't be. We should be past that. It's the analysis, the insights, the value. That's what farmers want in an ag tech solution. There's no reason, in my view, why the ag tech industry should not embrace the development of open source as a complement to their products. They can use this ability to have access to better data to generate better insights for growers. Growers should want to use a particular platform because it's best suited to their needs, not because it's too hard to change. While we are still battling with compatibility and interoperability issues, we will not see ag data deliver on the promises that are being made. I pose these questions. If you had control over your data and it was as simple as clicking a button to bring that data to a new platform, would you be more inclined to try new products? Consequently, do you feel like you have to stay with your current online farm recording provider because it's too hard to move the data across? Would you be more inclined to share your data with researchers if it was that simple? And for researchers, would it be easier to make use of that data if it was in a common open format with metadata? Maybe it's a fairy tale, but I believe if we embrace open source principles in ag tech, that will be possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So we have tonight gone all the way from bud to spud to farmer-led open source and everything in between. So I've been learning lots and I hope everyone else has too. Now we do have some questions for our panelists and we've got about 10 minutes. So please, if you have a question for one of the panelists, put that in the Q&A, or I'm getting used to the tech. I think you can raise your hand and you can actually, I can allow you to speak and you can actually say your question if you can't type all that fast. Nevertheless, Kerri, we'll start with you. We have a question from Dusty Pascoe, who's a 2020 scholar in Australia, who wants to know where potatoes sit on the government health star rating.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yep. Oh, hang on, later. Oh, start my video, sorry. I'm not actually sure where they sit on the health rating because there's so many different varied ways of eating potatoes. So they just sit in a nutritional panel. And a lot of packaging actually for fresh produce doesn't even have nutritional panels, only once it's actually value added. So that's sort of where we are with that.
Thanks, Kerri-Ann. Tom, a question for you about social license and free-range egg production. The comment is that consumers don't seem to look too far behind the label to the accreditation system. So do you have a response or a comment on that?
Yeah, and no, we see that a lot. I was just trying to type a text reply, but I couldn't type fast enough before you beat me to it. What we find is because the RSPCA are willing to approve the highest stocking density that you're allowed, smaller producers or lower density producers look for something else as a point of difference. Because if I said to someone I'm RSPCA approved, it's like, oh, well, so's everyone else. But there's no correlation between those smaller auditing processes. There's lots of them. And the second part to my point was going to be that none of our customers actually asked for it and none of them are willing to pay for it. That's the major thing that we find. when we wholesale eggs, there is no premium for being audited by anybody. So, yeah, it's a tricky one, and it's something that's hopefully going to develop as the industry grows.
So, Tom, does that mean there's still space in the Australian egg landscape for caged eggs?
Oh, I personally, yeah, and this goes against most people's expectations of what I would say, but I personally think yes, absolutely. Caged is a really important part of the egg production system because it still makes up over 50% of the market share on retail customers. So that's mums and dads needing to buy $4 or $3.50 dozen eggs, which we could never get anywhere near price-wise, and there's a demand for it. So to be forcing consumers to be buying a premium product when they're not in the market for it, I don't think is fair.
Thank you, Tom. You're still on the hot seat. There is another question for you that's come through from Lucy. It's a little long, so I will just read it. Tom, the new housing systems you discussed could have huge potential welfare impacts for both birds and stock people. Can you compare morbidities or mortalities between this and existing systems?
Yes, yeah. So what I found in Europe compared to the systems that I see over here and what I've got at home, actually being able to do a better overview of the birds. Generally, you're better off being able to look at the birds when you can see their feet in free range. Like if you can look through the equipment and see multiple levels of birds, pretty much no one should be laying down. They should all be sitting on perches if they're quite happy. And if you see birds that aren't on their feet, it's a really quick way for you to be able to jump in and just check on her, or if it is a mortality, take it out, because it's got to be gone as soon as possible. Is access a problem with the aviary? Well, yeah, because who wants to climb up 2.5 meters of equipment? But the newer systems are built with walkways. So, for example, on the slide I put up there, the Tyson's farm, that equipment has walkways that are at the higher level. So you can walk at that raised level without having to climb all over the chook frames. And the other systems that we did see in the rest of Europe, so that particular one, Tyson's, was in the UK. The other ones are just in aisles of equipment, much like cages with no fronts, if you want to think of it like that. And they are hard to see. You can't see the top level. You've got to climb on it. But there's better setups than that. They're improving them all the time.
Thank you, Tom. Claire, there's a question for you. I think you might be typing your answer, but if you wouldn't mind answering for us, it's about online learning. So Damien has asked, there's been a big move to online learning. Is that what you're looking for with your ag tours, or are you looking for the students to have on-farm experiences? How's it going to work?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I think COVID has actually taught us a lot about what we can do online. And really when you're looking at, again, like this filling your ag bag idea, we just need to make sure we've got those interactions happening more often, rather than having one great experience and then never hearing from anything in agriculture again. How would a 16-year-old then want to choose agriculture as a career? So I see it as an opportunity to have an on-farm experience and then use virtual reality, augmented, reality as well, and actually really complement the hands-on experience. And I think down here in Tassie, for instance, I really like how I could have an experience with a farmer. I could, take my class to a cotton crop. Well, I can't do that down here at all. So I think that's where I really like the fact that you can have the two sort of sitting in collaboration with each other. Yeah, good question.
You would know some cotton farmers who would allow you to do a virtual tour. Andrew, I have a question for Andrew from Clive Blacker. It's a question about data. If we follow an open data structure and platform, how do you encourage uptake when this could introduce security issues? So how would you encourage farmers to participate when they're reluctant to share?
Yeah, well, I guess I wouldn't I guess I tried to sort of make the definition between open source and open data. If we have an open data structure, I'm not suggesting that we have growers' data publicly available. I'm suggesting more that we have the structure of that data publicly available, so we can all use the same format, and that makes it a lot easier to share between. As far as security issues go, open source is as secure as any commercial product. OpenSSL, which does the back end of a lot of your banking and online transactions, is an open source project. And yeah, I mean, it's open source software is used by hundreds of huge companies. So yeah, there's no issues with security. I guess one advantage of it is that the code is available for anyone to look at. So if there are security issues in it, people can see that and fix it, rather than it being swept under the rug by a company that doesn't want to admit that error. But I think, yeah, we need to explain that to people so they understand the difference between open data and an open data structure and that sort of thing. Because for most people, like, this is a new thing.
Mm. Andrew, another question for you. Did you talk to any of the major equipment manufacturers about compatibility issues and compare the systems that they have and, you know, say, for example, the open source GPS? What did they say?
They're not particularly receptive. All the contacts I tried to make with two of the larger manufacturers went nowhere. And I spoke to one from a larger chemical provider, and that's not really a priority of theirs at this point. So yeah, it's something that's not an issue. Like, it's not on their agenda, because from their point of view, I guess it works better for them to have that lock-in. If you're one of the bigger companies, yeah, you want them to lock in. So yeah, it's a battle we've been fighting for 20 years now.
Mm. Thanks, Andrew. We've probably got time just for one more question, and the panelists will be able to answer questions afterwards. We will have a record of the Q&A. But Tom, it's another one for you about really the supply chain. So there's a couple of questions that are similar. Do you think that, what's the relationship with the farmer and the retailer, and who's setting the pricing? And do you think that there's a risk that the smaller producers are going to be squeezed out of the system here in Australia?
Most certainly. We've definitely seen that through the drought and even really COVID. We found that the market price for eggs, even though demand was through the roof, was stationary, if not average. You know, I don't know if Kerri can speak for the potato price, but that was all driven by pressure from the main people that were supplying most of the eggs, which of course is the biggest producers in the country. And even if they know that they're only making a couple of percent, they would rather make sure that I have no market share than some. So it's been really difficult, especially as feed price hasn't really come back what you'd think it would, with grain recovering like to more normal levels. We now find that our protein meals are very expensive. So there's now pressure from Asia that's buying a great deal of our soybean meal. So the bigger operators certainly do cause the fair share of headaches.
Kerri, did you want to comment on the potato price during COVID?
Well, it wasn't necessarily the price, only that the uptake of people actually purchasing potatoes just went crazy, because people perceived them as something that had a nice long shelf life. But there's always price pressure when it comes to supermarkets, and eggs would be very similar to potatoes. I'm sure they work on a very strong promo cycle. So they're have specials 1 week and then not for the next 2 weeks, and then on promo again. So yeah, it's just really important to have that difference, that point of difference to your product. but we just don't. That's one thing I really found in my travels, is that supermarkets in Australia have a very different model to supermarkets overseas, and that's because we only have quite a few here, and overseas they have, you know, one supermarket may only have 12% of the market share, which means people can have products that have a very big point of difference and are able to get that out into the market quickly and are able to get that feedback, that customer feedback that allows them to innovate more quickly and to see what the customer actually really wants. So things like that are just more difficult in Australia. So I can see how Tom would be finding it more difficult to do that, because you just don't have the outlets that you need to be able to drive that.
Thanks, Kerri. As I said, we do have a few more questions, but just ticking over the hour. And in the interest of time, we've all got busy lives. I'd like to call it to a close there. And as I said, the panelists will have access to the questions, and we'll make sure that those questions can be answered via email in coming days. So if we were here in person, you would all join me in congratulating our scholars, and we could have a round of applause. We can't really do that tonight, but certainly I think we are all virtually giving you a round of applause. You all gave us very succinct but interesting presentations tonight, and for that I thank you, Kerri, Tom, Claire and Andrew. For all our participants, please sign in again next week. We'll have another 4 of our Nuffield Australia 2019 scholars giving their presentations. So thank you all for your attendance. I'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.